The halls of Westridge Academy were always too quiet in the morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that makes you feel at ease, but the heavy kind that makes you feel like you're being watched. For Andre, that feeling never really went away, not since his first day 3 months ago when he stepped through those huge wooden doors with his second-hand uniform and a backpack his mother had carefully ironed the night before. Andre was 16, tall for his age with thoughtful eyes that seemed to take in everything around him, even as he kept his gaze fixed on the polished floor tiles. He had a habit of walking close to the walls as if trying to blend into them. It wasn't that he was afraid exactly. Andre had grown up in neighborhoods where you had to have some backbone. But Westridge was different. Here he wasn't dodging neighborhood bullies. He was navigating invisible lines drawn by money, privilege, and the color of his skin. "Watch where you're going," a voice snapped as Andre rounded the corner toward his locker. It was Tyler Reynolds, whose father's name was on one of the school buildings. Andre mumbled an apology despite the fact that Tyler had been the one to bump into him, then continued on his way, fingers tightening around the strap of his backpack. The scholarship that brought Andre to Westridge had seemed like a miracle when the letter arrived at their small apartment. His mother had cried, holding the paper like it was made of gold. "This is your ticket, baby," she'd said, her voice breaking with pride. "This is how you'll get everything I couldn't give you." What the letter hadn't mentioned was how lonely it would be to walk these halls as one of only 3 black students in the entire school. What it hadn't explained was how teachers would look past him when he raised his hand, or how classmates would fall silent when he approached their tables in the cafeteria. Andre pulled his chemistry textbook from his locker and checked his watch. He had 15 minutes before first period, just enough time to stop by the music room. If he was lucky, it would be empty. The music room was tucked away in the east wing of the school, far enough from regular classrooms that the sound of instruments wouldn't disturb other classes. Andre glanced both ways before slipping inside, relaxing only when he saw the room was indeed empty, the morning sunlight streaming through tall windows onto the baby grand piano in the corner. This had become his morning ritual. 15 precious minutes when he could sit at the keys and remember who he was outside these walls. He placed his backpack carefully on the floor and approached the piano with a reverence that would have surprised his classmates, who barely noticed him shuffling between classes. At home, there was no piano. There had been one once, an old upright that belonged to his grandmother. She'd been the one to first place his small hands on the keys when he was barely tall enough to reach them. "Music is a language, child," she would say in her soft voice. "Sometimes it says things we don't have words for." After she passed, the piano had to be sold to help with rent. Andre had cried for days, not just for his grandmother, but for the loss of those keys beneath his fingers. That was 3 years ago. Now this school piano was the only one he could play, and only in stolen moments like these. He sat down on the bench and took a deep breath. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before coming down softly, finding the opening notes of a melody he'd been working out in his head during math class yesterday. It wasn't anything fancy. He had never had formal lessons, but there was something pure about the way he played, something that came from a place of raw feeling rather than technical training. The melody was simple at first, like a question being asked. Then it grew, becoming more complex as his confidence built. Andre closed his eyes, losing himself in the rhythm, his shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. Here, with just the piano, he wasn't the scholarship kid or the outsider. He was just himself. "What are you doing in here?" The sharp voice cut through the music like a knife. Andre's hands jumped from the keys as his eyes snapped open. Mrs. Whitfield, the school's music teacher, stood in the doorway, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. I was just," Andre stammered, already standing up from the bench, reaching for his backpack. "This room is for students enrolled in music classes," Mrs. Whitfield said, walking toward him with quick, precise steps. "Do you have permission to be in here?" "No, ma'am," Andre said quietly. "I'm sorry. You were just touching an expensive instrument without permission," she finished for him. Her eyes moved from his face to his hands and back again, as if she couldn't believe what she had witnessed. "Who taught you to play?" The question caught Andre off guard. He had expected a lecture, maybe even detention, but not curiosity. "My grandmother, a little," he answered honestly. "Mostly I just figure things out." Mrs. Whitfield's eyebrows rose slightly. "That piece. What was it?" Andre shifted uncomfortably. It's nothing, really. Just something I was making up. There was a long pause as Mrs. Whitfield seemed to be considering something. The bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. You should get to class, she finally said, her voice neither warm nor cold. And in the future, please remember that school facilities are not for unauthorized use. Andre nodded quickly, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again. As he hurried out the door and down the hall toward his chemistry class, Andre tried to push away the heavy feeling in his chest. It wasn't just about being caught or being scolded. It was about having that one small piece of joy, that one place where he felt like himself taken away. Chemistry passed in a blur of formulas and equations that Andre couldn't focus on. Then English, where they were discussing a book with no characters that looked like him or lived lives anything like his. By lunch, he had a headache pressing behind his eyes. The cafeteria was a maze of unspoken rules about who could sit where. Andre had learned quickly that the safest option was the table near the trash cans, where he could eat quickly and leave without drawing attention. He unwrapped the sandwich his mother had made that morning, peanut butter and jelly on wheat bread, and took a bite, trying not to look at the hot lunches on the trays of other students. Is this seat taken? Andre looked up, surprised to see a girl standing across from him. He recognized her from his math class, Ling, one of the few other scholarship students. They had never spoken before. No, he said, moving his backpack to make room. It's free. Ling sat down, placing her tray on the table. She had the same lunch as everyone else, some kind of pasta dish that smelled like garlic and herbs. I heard you play this morning, she said without preamble. Before Mrs. Whitfield came in. Andre nearly choked on his sandwich. You did? Ling nodded, twirling pasta around her fork. I practice violin in the practice room next door sometimes. The walls are thin. She took a bite and then added, You're really good. A warmth spread through Andre's chest, fighting against the chill that had settled there earlier. Thanks, he said quietly. Do you take lessons? Ling asked. Andre shook his head. No, can't afford them. There was no shame in his voice when he said it. It was just a fact, like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. Some kids had money for lessons and some kids didn't. Ling seemed to understand. She nodded and continued eating her lunch. Well, you should think about joining the school orchestra. They need a pianist. The last one graduated, and none of the current music students are good enough. Andre almost laughed at the idea. Mrs. Whitfield would never let me join. She doesn't even want me in the music room. Maybe, Ling shrugged. But Mr. Benton is the one who runs the orchestra, and he's always saying he cares more about talent than training. You should talk to him. Before Andre could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Ling stood up, gathering her tray. Just think about it, she said, before disappearing into the crowd of students. Andre sat for a moment longer, turning her words over in his mind. The idea of playing in front of others made his stomach twist with anxiety. But there was another feeling there, too. A small, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for him here after all. The rest of the day dragged on, each class blending into the next. By the time the final bell rang, Andre felt drained, as if the building itself had been slowly sapping his energy all day. He made his way to his locker, exchanging books and binders for the ones he'd need for homework. As he closed his locker door, he noticed a small white paper that had been slipped through the vents. Curious, he unfolded it to find a brief message written in neat handwriting. Orchestra practice, room 108, Thursdays after school. Come this week. Andre stared at the note, a mix of emotions washing over him. Fear, excitement, doubt, hope, all swirling together like the complex melodies he sometimes heard in his dreams. He carefully folded the note and tucked it into his pocket. Outside, the September air was turning crisp as autumn began to take hold. Andre zipped up his jacket and began the long walk to the bus stop. His mother wouldn't be home until late. Her second job cleaning offices downtown kept her out until after 9 most nights. As he waited for the bus, Andre thought about the piano in the music room, its keys cool and smooth beneath his fingers. He thought about the way the music had flowed from some deep place inside him, a place untouched by the daily struggles of being where he didn't seem to belong. He thought about Ling's words and the note in his pocket. Thursday was only 2 days away. The bus arrived with a squeal of brakes, and Andre climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. As the city passed by outside the window, He began to tap his fingers against his knee, playing an invisible melody, rehearsing for a moment that might never come. But for the first time in months, there was a flutter of something like anticipation in his chest. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow might bring something different. Thursday came faster than Andre expected. For 2 days, he had carried Ling's note in his pocket like a secret charm, taking it out between classes to make sure it was real. Each time he read it, his mind filled with a mix of hope and doubt. He hadn't gone back to the music room since Mrs. Whitfield had caught him there. The thought of that disapproving look on her face was enough to keep him away. As the final bell rang on Thursday afternoon, Andre stood at his locker, his heart beating a little too fast. Most students were rushing to leave, eager to start their weekend early. Andre moved slowly, giving himself time to think. He could just go home. No one would know. No one would care. Except maybe Ling, but they weren't really friends. Just 2 kids who had shared lunch once. You coming or what? Andre turned to find Ling standing there, violin case in hand, eyebrows raised in question. I don't know, Andre admitted. I've been thinking about it, but what? Ling asked, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. You can play. I heard you. Playing alone is different, Andre said, closing his locker. And I don't read music. Not really. My grandmother taught me some basics, but mostly I play by ear. Ling considered this for a moment. Mr. Benton cares about sound, not how you get there. She checked her watch. Look, just come today. If you hate it, you never have to come back. There was something about her matter-of-fact tone that made it hard to argue. Andre sighed and nodded. All right. Just today. Room 108 was larger than the regular music room, with chairs arranged in a semicircle and music stands placed throughout. When Andre and Ling walked in, about 15 students were already there, unpacking instruments and chatting. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and round glasses stood at the front, sorting through sheet music. That's Mr. Benton, Ling whispered, nodding toward the man. I'll tell him you're here. Before Andre could object, Ling was making her way to the front of the room, leaving him standing awkwardly by the door. He watched as she spoke to Mr. Benton, who looked up and met Andre's eyes. The teacher smiled and motioned for him to come forward. Andre's legs felt heavy as he approached. Mr. Benton extended a hand. You must be Andre. Ling tells me you're a pianist. Not really, sir, Andre said, shaking the teacher's hand. I just play sometimes. Well, we're in need of just playing at the moment, Mr. Benton said with a gentle laugh. Our last pianist graduated in June, and we've been making do with recordings for certain pieces. Would you mind showing me what you can do? Andre glanced at the baby grand piano in the corner of the room. It was similar to the one in the music room, but somehow more intimidating with all these eyes potentially watching. Now? Andre asked, his mouth suddenly dry. No time like the present, Mr. Benton said. Don't worry about the others. They're too busy warming up to pay attention. This wasn't entirely true. Andre could feel curious glances from several students. But he followed Mr. Benton to the piano anyway. As he sat down on the bench, he wiped his sweaty palms on his pants and took a deep breath. Play anything you like, Mr. Benton said, standing beside the piano. Something that shows what you can do. Andre's mind went blank for a moment. What should he play? Classical would impress them, but he only knew bits and pieces taught by his grandmother. Pop songs seemed too simple, jazz too complex for his self-taught skills. Then he remembered a piece his grandmother used to play. An old gospel song that she said had carried her through hard times. His fingers found the keys and he began to play. The melody was rich with emotion. Joy and sorrow intertwined, hope rising above pain. Andre started softly, then built the sound as his confidence grew. He wasn't playing it exactly as his grandmother had. He was adding his own touches, letting the music speak for the things he couldn't say with words. When he finished, the room had fallen silent. Andre looked up to find not just Mr. Benton watching him, but the entire orchestra. His cheeks grew warm. Mr. Benton cleared his throat. That was quite beautiful, Andre. You say you haven't had formal training? Andre shook his head. Just what my grandmother taught me, and I practice whenever I can. You have a natural ear, Mr. Benton said, and you play with feeling, which is something I can't teach. He turned to a shelf behind him and pulled out a folder of sheet music. Can you read music at all? A little. Andre admitted. Basic notes. I'm better at playing what I hear. Mr. Benton nodded thoughtfully. That can work in our favor, actually. We're preparing for the winter showcase, and I have some arrangements that might suit your style. He placed the folder on the piano. Why don't you stay for today's practice? See how it feels to play with others. No pressure, no pressure. Andre almost laughed at that. Everything about this school felt like pressure, but the way Mr. Benton spoke to him like he was truly seeing him made Andre want to try. Okay, he said. I'll stay. The next hour passed in a blur of new experiences. Andre struggled with the sheet music at first, but Mr. Benton was patient, and to his surprise, so were the other students. A girl who played cello showed him how to follow along with chord notations. A boy with a trumpet pointed out patterns in the music that made it easier to anticipate changes. By the end of practice, Andre's head was swimming with new information. But there was a lightness in his chest that hadn't been there before. As students packed up their instruments, several stopped to introduce themselves. Not everyone, of course, and some still looked at him with the same distance he felt in the hallways, but enough to make him feel less like a ghost. So, Ling asked as they walked out together. What did you think? Andre considered the question. It was different. Playing with other people. Hearing how all the parts fit together. Good different? Ling pressed. A small smile tugged at Andre's lips. Yeah, good different. So you'll come back next week? Andre nodded, surprised to find he meant it. Yeah, I'll come back. The weekend passed with Andre splitting his time between homework and practicing on an old keyboard his mother had found at a thrift store years ago. It wasn't the same as a real piano. The keys were lighter, the sound tinny, but it was something. He tried to work out the parts Mr. Benton had given him, training his ear to remember the melodies. On Monday morning, Andre arrived at school earlier than usual. He hesitated outside the music room, then took a deep breath and went in. The room was empty, just as he'd hoped. He sat at the piano and began to practice the orchestra pieces, losing track of time as he worked through difficult passages. He was so focused that he didn't hear the door open. It wasn't until a shadow fell across the keys that he looked up to find Mrs. Whitfield standing there. Andre's hands froze on the keys. I'm sorry, he said quickly, already standing up. I know I shouldn't be in here without permission. Mr. Benton told me he's recruited you for the orchestra, Mrs. Whitfield said, her expression unreadable. Andre nodded, waiting for her to tell him to leave. Instead, she surprised him. If you're going to be using this room to practice, you should have this. She held out a small brass key. It's for the music room. Morning practice is fine, but please sign the logbook when you come in and out. Andre stared at the key, not quite believing what he was seeing. You're giving me permission to use the piano. The winter showcase is important, Mrs. Whitfield said simply. If Mr. Benton thinks you can help, then you should have proper time to practice. She placed the key on top of the piano. Don't make me regret this. With that, she turned and left, leaving Andre staring after her in shock. He picked up the key, feeling its weight in his palm. It wasn't exactly acceptance, but it was something. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Andre arrived early each morning to practice on the piano. He ate lunch with Ling and occasionally a few other orchestra members. Thursday afternoons were spent in room 108, where Mr. Benton was teaching him not just to play the pieces for the showcase, but to understand the structure of music itself. You have a gift, Mr. Benton told him one afternoon as they worked on a particularly difficult section. But gifts need nurturing to grow. For the first time since coming to Westridge, Andre felt like he might have found a place where he belonged. Not everywhere. The classroom still felt cold. The hallways still filled with whispers. But in room 108, with music flowing around him, he could breathe. Then came the announcement that changed everything. As you all know, Mr. Benton said at the end of a Thursday practice in late October, the Winter Showcase is our biggest event of the year. The entire school attends, along with parents, alumni, and board members. He looked around at the orchestra members. This year, we've been invited to perform not just our usual set, but to provide accompaniment for the choir's opening number. A murmur of excitement ran through the room. The choir was the pride of Westridge, filled with students from the most prominent families. And, Mr. Benton continued, they've specifically requested piano accompaniment for their solo piece. His eyes found Andre. I've recommended you for the position. The room fell silent. Andre felt his heart skip a beat. Me? He asked, his voice barely audible. You, Mr. Benton confirmed. It's a challenging piece, but I believe you're up to it. You'll need to attend choir practices on Tuesdays to work with their soloist. As the news sank in, Andre felt a mixture of pride and terror. This wasn't just playing with the orchestra anymore. This was stepping into the spotlight, playing for the whole school, for people who had never even noticed him before. The choir director, Ms. Hayes, will expect you at their practice next Tuesday, Mr. Benton added. She'll provide the music beforehand so you can familiarize yourself with it. As practice ended and students filed out, Andre remained at the piano, his mind racing. Ling paused beside him on her way out. This is a big deal, she said quietly. The choir doesn't usually work with orchestra members for their solos. I know, Andre said, staring at the keys. I don't understand why they picked me, Ling shrugged. Because you're good. Really good. She adjusted her violin case strap. Just don't let them get to you. What do you mean? The choir kids, Ling said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. They're not like us. They're rich? Andre offered, entitled, Ling corrected. Just be careful. With that cryptic warning, she left, leaving Andre alone with his thoughts and the weight of an opportunity he'd never expected to have. The choir room was on the opposite side of the school from where the orchestra practiced. In a space specially designed with acoustic panels and tiered seating, Andre stood outside the double doors on Tuesday afternoon, the sheet music Mr. Benton had given him clutched in his hands. He had spent the weekend practicing the piece, a complex arrangement of a classical piece that had been modernized for the choir. Taking a deep breath, Andre pushed open one of the doors and stepped inside. Unlike the casual atmosphere of orchestra practice, the choir room hummed with a different energy. About 30 students stood in formation on the risers, their posture perfect, their attention focused on the woman standing before them with a baton. Ms. Hayes was nothing like Mr. Benton. Where he was warm and encouraging, she was precise and demanding. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a tailored black dress that seemed to absorb the light around her. You must be Andre, she said without smiling, her eyes flicking over him quickly. You're late, Andre checked his watch. He was actually 2 minutes early, but he didn't argue. Sorry, ma'am. Ms. Hayes gestured to the piano in the corner. We've already begun. The soloist is working on her part. You'll need to catch up. Andre made his way to the piano, feeling the eyes of the choir members on him. As he sat down, he noticed a girl standing apart from the others holding sheet music identical to his. She had long blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no in her life. This is Catherine, Ms. Hayes said. She'll be performing the solo. You'll need to follow her lead. Catherine gave Andre a quick, assessing look. There was no warmth in it, but no obvious disdain either. Just calculation. Let's take it from the bridge, Ms. Hayes instructed. Catherine, whenever you're ready. Andre positioned his hands over the keys, studying the music. The piece began simply enough, but the middle section was complex, with key changes and tempo shifts that would challenge even an experienced pianist. Catherine nodded at him and began to sing. Her voice was technically perfect, clear, strong, and precise. Andre followed with the piano, trying to match her energy. The first few measures went smoothly, but as they approached the difficult middle section, he felt himself starting to tense up. Stop, Ms. Hayes called out sharply. Andre, you're dragging. This needs to be crisp. Again from the bridge. Andre took a deep breath and repositioned his hands. This time he tried to anticipate the changes, watching Catherine for cues. They made it through the bridge, but then, stop. You're rushing now, again. For the next 45 minutes, they repeated the same section over and over. Each time, Ms. Hayes found something to criticize. He was too loud, too soft, too hesitant, too aggressive. Never just right. By the time the practice ended, Andre's shoulders ached with tension, and he felt drained. As the choir members began to file out, Catherine approached the piano. You're new, she said. It wasn't a question, Andre nodded. I usually play with the orchestra. I know, Catherine said. Mr. Benton mentioned you. He seems to think you're some kind of prodigy. There was something in her tone that Andre couldn't quite read. Not exactly unfriendly, but not welcoming either. I'm not, Andre said honestly. I just like to play. Catherine studied him for a moment. This piece is important. It's the opening of the showcase, and the headmaster always brings special guests to the winter event. People who matter. She tapped the sheet music. I need it to be perfect. I'm trying, Andre said, feeling defensive. Trying isn't enough, Catherine replied. My father is on the board of trustees. This performance reflects on him, on my family. She picked up her bag. I practice in here during lunch tomorrow. You should join me. We need to get this right. Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked away, leaving Andre sitting alone at the piano. He gathered his music slowly, thinking about what had just happened. It hadn't been friendly exactly, but it was an invitation, of sorts. As he made his way through the now empty halls toward the bus stop, Andre tried to shake off the weight of the practice. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his mother. Working late tonight. Leftover chicken in fridge. Don't wait up. Love you. Andre texted back a quick love you too and continued walking. His mother had been picking up extra shifts lately, trying to save for college application fees. She didn't say it, but Andre knew that's what it was for. Each extra hour she worked was an investment in his future, a future she believed Westridge would help secure. The thought added another layer of pressure. It wasn't just about the winter showcase anymore. It was about proving he belonged at this school, that all his mother's sacrifices were worth it. The next day, Andre skipped lunch to meet Catherine in the choir room. She was already there when he arrived, running through vocal exercises. Good, you came, she said when she saw him. Let's get started. For the next 30 minutes, they worked through the piece without Ms. Hayes's constant interruptions. To Andre's surprise, Catherine was direct but not unkind in her feedback. You're playing it too technically, she said after their third run-through. This piece needs to breathe. Listen. She sang a phrase without piano, then motioned for him to join. Feel how it moves. The music should flow like water, not tick like a clock. Andre adjusted his playing, letting the notes flow more naturally. Catherine nodded in approval. Better. Much better. They continued this way for several days. Official practices with Ms. Hayes and the full choir, where every mistake was magnified, and lunch practices with just the two of them, where Andre slowly began to understand not just the notes, but the feeling behind them. By the second week, something had shifted. The piece was coming together, and even Ms. Hayes had fewer criticisms. After one particularly good run-through, she actually nodded in what might have been approval. You're improving, she told Andre as practice ended. Keep it up. Coming from Ms. Hayes, it felt like high praise. Andre couldn't help the small smile that formed as he packed up his sheet music. She doesn't compliment often, Catherine said, appearing beside him. Consider yourself lucky. Does she ever actually say something is good? Andre asked. A hint of a smile touched Catherine's lips. Once, 3 years ago, she told the senior soloist her performance was adequate. The girl cried from happiness. Andre laughed, surprised by the moment of shared humor. Catherine's smile widened briefly before she caught herself and returned to her usual composed expression. We should run through the ending again tomorrow, she said. I'm still not satisfied with the final crescendo. Andre nodded. I'll be here. As he left the choir room, Andre realized something strange had happened. Without quite meaning to, he had begun to care about this performance not just for himself but for Catherine too. She might come from a different world, one of board meetings and family legacies, but music had created an unexpected bridge between them. The next day, Andre arrived at the choir room for their lunch practice to find it empty. He waited, thinking Catherine might be running late, but 15 minutes passed with no sign of her. Just as he was about to leave, the door opened. But it wasn't Catherine who entered. It was Tyler Reynolds and 2 other boys from the choir, all sons of wealthy families, all fixtures of the school's social elite. Well, look who's here, Tyler said, his voice carrying the false cheer that always preceded trouble, the charity case. Andre stood up from the piano bench, immediately on guard. I was just leaving. Were you? Tyler asked, moving to block the door. Catherine sent us to give you a message. She won't be joining you today. Something cold settled in Andre's stomach. Okay. I'll see her at regular practice then. Tyler exchanged glances with his friends, a smirk forming on his face. Here's the thing. Some of us have been talking. About you. About this arrangement. What arrangement? Andre asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew what was coming. You playing for the showcase, one of the other boys said. It's not right. The winter showcase is Westridge tradition, Tyler continued. It's for people who belong here. People who earned their spot, not people who got in because the school needed to look diverse for the brochures. The words hit like a physical blow, but Andre had learned long ago not to show when something hurt. He kept his face neutral, his voice steady. Mr. Benton selected me to play. Ms. Hayes approved it. Mr. Benton has strange ideas, Tyler said dismissively. And Ms. Hayes just hasn't heard the better option yet. Better option? The third boy stepped forward. Me. I've been playing piano since I was 4. Private lessons, competitions, the works. I should be playing for the showcase, not you. Now it made sense. This wasn't just about Andre not belonging. It was about someone else wanting his spot. If you're so good, why didn't Mr. Benton pick you? Andre asked before he could stop himself. Tyler's face darkened. Watch it, scholarship. You're on thin ice already. What does that mean? It means Catherine's father was very interested to hear that his daughter is spending her lunch periods with, well, you. Tyler's smile was ugly now. The Board of Trustees takes a special interest in scholarship students, making sure they're living up to expectations, being appropriate. The threat was clear, even if the words were vague. Andre felt anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. We're practicing music, he said. That's all. For now, Tyler said. But one call from her father and you could lose that scholarship. One call from my father, too. He stepped closer. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Mr. Benton you don't feel ready for the showcase. You're going to step aside, and things can go back to the way they should be. Andre looked from one face to another, searching for any sign of decency, any crack in their unified front. There was none. Think about it, Tyler said. But don't think too long. He gestured to his friends, and they moved toward the door. Some things just aren't worth the risk. They left, the door swinging shut behind them with a soft click that felt like the closing of a tomb. Andre stood there, the silence of the room pressing in around him. All the progress of the past weeks, all the small victories seemed to crumble away, leaving him back where he started, alone and unwelcome. He sat back down at the piano, his fingers resting lightly on the keys without pressing them. The piece they had been practicing ran through his head, beautiful and complex. He had come to love it, to feel proud of his ability to bring it to life. Now he had to decide, was it worth fighting for? Or was Tyler right? Were some things just not worth the risk? Andre didn't tell anyone about Tyler's threat. Not Ling, not Mr. Benton, not his mother. The words festered inside him, poisoning the joy he had found in the music. During orchestra practice, he went through the motions, his fingers hitting the right notes but without the heart that had impressed Mr. Benton in the first place. You seem distracted today, Mr. Benton said as the other students packed up after Thursday's practice. Everything all right with the choir rehearsals? Andre avoided his teacher's concerned gaze. It's fine. Just a lot to learn. Mr. Benton didn't look convinced. Ms. Hayes can be demanding, but she appreciates talent. Don't let her intimidate you. If only it were that simple, Andre thought. But he just nodded and gathered his sheet music. I'll work harder. The next day, Andre arrived at choir practice with his decision made. He would tell Mr. Benton he wasn't ready for the showcase. He would step aside. His scholarship, his future, was too important to risk over a single performance. But when he entered the choir room, Catherine was waiting by the piano, alone. You're late, she said, but without the edge her voice usually carried. Andre hesitated in the doorway. I didn't think you'd be here. Why wouldn't I be? Andre set his backpack down slowly. Your friends came to see me yesterday. Tyler and the others. Something flashed across Catherine's face, surprise, then understanding, then anger. What did they say to you? It doesn't matter, Andre said, sitting at the piano. Where's Ms. Hayes? Meeting with the department heads. She'll be here in 20 minutes. Catherine placed her sheet music on the piano. It does matter. What did they say? Andre's fingers pressed silently against the keys, not hard enough to make sound. They said I should step aside. That I don't belong here in this showcase. That your father wouldn't like you spending time with me. The last part came out more bitter than he'd intended. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. My father doesn't know anything about music, she finally said, or who I spend time with during lunch, but he's on the board. Tyler said. Tyler says a lot of things, Catherine interrupted. Most of them aren't worth listening to. Andre looked up at her, trying to read her expression. They said I could lose my scholarship. Catherine's eyes widened. They threatened you? With your scholarship? When Andre nodded, her face hardened. They can't do that. Only the administration can revoke scholarships, and only for academic or disciplinary reasons. Tyler's father is on the board too. The board doesn't handle individual student matters, Catherine said firmly. My father complains about it all the time, how little actual power they have over day-to-day operations. She crossed her arms. Tyler was bluffing. He does that. Andre wanted to believe her, but doubt still gnawed at him. Why would he do that? Why does he care who plays at the showcase? Catherine sighed and sat down on the bench beside him, leaving careful space between them. Because David, the one who said he should be playing instead of you, is his cousin. And because Tyler can't stand when things don't go the way he thinks they should. And how should they go? Andre asked quietly. Catherine was silent for a moment, staring at the sheet music. According to Tyler, people like you and people like me shouldn't even be in the same room, let alone working together. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. But Tyler doesn't get to decide that. I do. There was a fierceness in her voice that Andre hadn't heard before. Not the controlled precision of her singing, but something raw and real. So you still want to practice? He asked, surprised. Of course I do. We have 3 weeks until the showcase, and we still haven't perfected the ending. She straightened her shoulders. And you're a better pianist than David. Everyone knows it, even if they won't admit it. Before Andre could respond, the door opened and Ms. Hayes swept in, followed by the rest of the choir. Catherine moved away from the piano, taking her place with the sopranos. As the practice began, Andre felt something shift inside him, the weight of his decision lifting, replaced by a new determination. He played with more focus than ever before, matching Catherine's voice note for note, building the crescendos and softening the diminuendos with a precision that even Ms. Hayes couldn't criticize. By the end of practice, the choir director was actually nodding in approval. That's more like it, she said. Keep this up and we might actually be ready in time. As the choir members filed out, Andre noticed Tyler watching him with narrowed eyes. But for once, he didn't look away. He met Tyler's gaze steadily until the other boy turned and left. Catherine approached the piano, her expression guarded but determined. Same time Monday for lunch practice? Andre nodded. I'll be here. The weekend passed in a blur of homework and extra practice on his old keyboard. By Monday morning, Andre felt more centered than he had in days. The threat still loomed, but he refused to let it drive him away from something he'd earned. He was unlocking the music room for his morning practice when he heard voices from inside. Pausing, he pressed his ear to the door. Completely inappropriate, a man was saying, his voice sharp with authority. The winter showcase is a Westridge tradition. We have standards to maintain. With all due respect, Mr. Reynolds, came Mr. Benton's voice. Andre Johnson is the most talented pianist we've had in years. His playing will elevate the entire performance. Andre's breath caught. Mr. Reynolds, Tyler's father. He was talking about him. Talent isn't everything, Mr. Reynolds responded. There's also the matter of fit. Of representation. The showcase is viewed by potential donors, board members, alumni, all of whom will be impressed by the music. Mr. Benton interrupted. Isn't that what matters? There was a pause, and Andre could imagine the tension in the room. My nephew has been taking piano lessons since he was a child, Mr. Reynolds said, his voice quieter but no less intense. He deserves this opportunity. David auditioned last year, Mr. Benton replied evenly. And the year before. He's a competent player, but he lacks the emotional connection that Andre brings to the music. This isn't about deserving, it's about who will perform the piece best. I see. Mr. Reynolds' voice had gone cold. Well, I think the board might be interested to hear about your priorities, especially given the budget reviews coming up for your department. Andre's stomach dropped. It was happening, exactly what Tyler had threatened. He was about to back away from the door when Mr. Benton spoke again. Are you threatening my program because I won't replace a talented student with your nephew? The music teacher's voice was calm but firm. Because that would be highly inappropriate, wouldn't it? I'm simply pointing out that decisions have consequences, Mr. Reynolds replied. Think about it, Benton. There's still time to make changes to the program. Andre heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly backed away, ducking around the corner. He watched as Mr. Reynolds strode past, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, His face set in lines of displeasure. When he was gone, Andre hesitated, then knocked on the music room door. "Come in," Mr. Benton called, sounding tired. Andre entered to find his teacher sitting at the desk, pinching the bridge of his nose beneath his glasses. "Andre," Mr. Benton said, straightening up. "You're early today." "I heard," Andre said simply. "Through the door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but—" Mr. Benton sighed. "How much did you hear?" "Enough!" Andre set his backpack down. "He wants you to replace me with his nephew." "What Tyler's father wants isn't important," Mr. Benton said firmly. "You earned your spot in this showcase, and as long as I'm the music director, you'll keep it." But he threatened the department budget. "Because of me, not because of you," Mr. Benton corrected. "Because of his own entitlement." He stood up and walked to the piano, running his hand along its polished surface. "You know, when I first came to Westridge 15 years ago, I believed in what this place stood for. Excellence, opportunity, growth. Over the years, I've watched it become more about connections than merit, more about maintaining the status quo than challenging it." He turned to face Andre. "Then you came along, a student who plays not because his parents forced him into lessons, not because it looks good on a college application, but because the music lives inside him." He smiled slightly. "I'm not going to let them take that away from you. Or from me." Andre felt a tightness in his throat. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing anything," Mr. Benton said. "You're just being who you are. And that's enough to threaten people who believe their privilege is the same thing as talent." Before Andre could respond, the door opened and Ling appeared, violin case in hand. "Oh," she said, seeing them both. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," Mr. Benton assured her. "Andre and I were just finishing our conversation." He gave Andre a significant look. "Remember what I said. You belong here." As Mr. Benton left, Ling raised an eyebrow at Andre. What was that about? Andre considered brushing it off, keeping the burden to himself as he usually did. But the weight of it all, Tyler's threats, Mr. Reynolds's visit, the upcoming showcase, suddenly felt too heavy to carry alone. "Tyler and his father are trying to get me kicked out of the showcase," he said, the words tumbling out. "They want his cousin to play instead of me." Ling's eyes widened. "Can they do that?" "Mr. Benton says no, but Tyler's father threatened the music department budget." Andre sat heavily on the piano bench. "Maybe I should just quit. It's not worth putting Mr. Benton's program at risk." "That's exactly what they want," Ling said, her voice sharp with anger. "For you to give up. To stay in your place what else can I do?" Andre asked, frustrated. "Fight the entire board of trustees?" Ling was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "No, you make them fight themselves." "What do you mean?" "The winter showcase isn't just for the board," Ling explained. "It's for everyone. Parents, alumni, local news sometimes. What if everyone heard you play? Not just in the background for the choir, but really play?" Andre shook his head. "The program is already set. There's no solo piano piece, so we add one," Ling said, her eyes bright with determination. "A special edition. We just need to convince Ms. Hayes and Mr. Benton. Ms. Hayes would never agree to change the program." "Maybe not for you," Ling conceded. "But what about for Catherine, the golden girl of Westridge Choir?" Andre stared at her. "You think Catherine would help me?" Ling shrugged. "I've seen how she looks at you during practices. Like she's actually impressed. That's rare for her." She picked up her violin. "It's worth a try. What's the worst that could happen?" Andre thought about Tyler's threat, about Mr. Reynolds' cold voice, about his scholarship and his mother's sacrifices. "A lot, actually. And the best that could happen?" "The best that could happen." Andre's fingers found the piano keys, playing a soft, thoughtful melody. "The best that could happen was that he would play, really play, and show everyone at Westridge exactly who he was and what he could do." "I need to talk to Catherine," he said, a plan beginning to form in his mind. The winter showcase was a week away, and Westridge Academy buzzed with anticipation. Posters lined the hallways, programs were being printed, and final rehearsals consumed every afternoon. For Andre, time seemed to move both too quickly and too slowly at once. Each day brought him closer to the moment of truth. "You're sure about this?" he asked Catherine as they finished their lunch practice. They had just run through their piece flawlessly, each note falling perfectly into place with her voice. Catherine nodded, closing her sheet music. I already spoke to Ms. Hayes. She wasn't happy about the change, but she agreed. What exactly did you tell her? A small smile played at the corners of Catherine's mouth. That as the featured soloist, I felt strongly that the showcase should include a demonstration of your exceptional talent. That the audience deserved to hear what you can really do. And she just said yes to adding a solo piano piece that wasn't in the program. Not at first, Catherine admitted. But I can be persuasive when I need to be. Andre could imagine. In the weeks they had practiced together, he had seen glimpses of the steel beneath Catherine's polished exterior. She might come from privilege, but she had earned her place as the lead soloist through hard work and determination. In another world, another life, they might have been friends from the start. Thank you, Andre said simply. Catherine met his eyes. Just don't mess it up, she said. But there was no bite to her words. What will you play? Andre had been thinking about this since Ling first suggested the idea. Something original. Something they haven't heard before. Catherine's eyebrows rose. You're going to compose a piece? In a week? It's already in my head, Andre said. Has been for a while. I just need to get it out. They were interrupted by the arrival of Ms. Hayes, followed by the rest of the choir filing in for afternoon practice. Catherine moved to her position, and Andre turned his attention to the piano, his mind already working on the piece that would either vindicate him or confirm all of Tyler's claims about his belonging. The next few days passed in a blur of rehearsals and late nights. Andre worked on his composition whenever he could, early mornings in the music room, lunch periods when Catherine was busy with choir obligations, evenings at home on his old keyboard with the headphones plugged in so he wouldn't disturb his mother. The piece evolved as he worked, becoming something that told his story, not just at Westridge, but his whole journey. The beginning was tentative, searching, like a child discovering music for the first time. The middle grew more complex, with moments of discord that resolved into unexpected harmony, representing the challenges he'd faced and overcome, and the ending. The ending was still forming, still becoming. 2 days before the showcase, Andre arrived at school to find a small crowd gathered around the bulletin board where the event program was posted. As he approached, he saw what had caught their attention. There, at the bottom of the program, a late edition, special performance original piano composition by Andre Johnson. Whispers followed him down the hall. Some students looked confused, others curious. A few looked openly hostile. Andre kept his head high even as doubt crept in. Was he ready for this? Was his composition good enough? What if he froze or stumbled or proved Tyler right after all? In orchestra practice that afternoon, Mr. Benton pulled him aside. I heard about your addition to the program, the teacher said. Catherine can be quite persuasive, it seems. Are you upset? Andre asked. Mr. Benton chuckled. Upset, no. Surprised, yes. But pleased. He placed a hand on Andre's shoulder. I've been waiting for you to believe in yourself as much as I do. I'm nervous, Andre admitted. What if it's not good enough? Music isn't about being good enough, Mr. Benton said gently. It's about being honest. Play from your heart, and no one can deny what they hear. The day of the showcase arrived cold and clear, winter sunlight streaming through the windows of Westridge Academy. The auditorium, normally used for assemblies and speeches, had been transformed with special lighting and an improved sound system. The grand piano from the music room gleamed under the stage lights. Freshly tuned and waiting, Andre arrived early. His best clothes, a white button-up shirt and black pants that his mother had carefully ironed, feeling stiff and formal. He peeked through the curtains at the auditorium as it slowly filled. Parents in their finest attire, alumni returning to their old school, board members and donors in the front rows, including Mr. Reynolds, whose stern profile was unmistakable even from a distance. Nervous? Ling asked, appearing beside him in her orchestra uniform. Andre nodded, unable to find words. Don't be, she said with conviction. You're going to be amazing, and I'll be right there in the orchestra pit, giving you evil eyes if you mess up. That made him smile, breaking some of the tension. The orchestra performed first, playing 2 classical pieces that had been part of their fall repertoire. Andre played his part mechanically, his mind already jumping ahead to what was coming next. Then the choir took the stage, their voices filling the auditorium with perfect harmony. Catherine stepped forward for her solo, and Andre moved to the piano. This was the piece they had practiced for weeks, the one that had brought them together despite their different worlds. Andre let his fingers find the familiar patterns, supporting Catherine's voice as it soared above the choir. They moved as one, music and voice intertwined, building to a crescendo that left the audience in breathless silence, before erupting into applause. Catherine smiled at him as they took their bow, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Good luck," she whispered as she rejoined the choir for their exit. Andre remained seated at the piano as the choir filed off stage. The program stated that his solo would follow immediately after. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him waiting. In the front row, Mr. Reynolds leaned over to whisper something to the man beside him, his expression disapproving. Ms. Hayes stepped forward to the microphone at the side of the stage. "Next, we have a special addition to our program. Andre Johnson, a scholarship student in his first year at Westridge, will perform an original composition." The way she said scholarship student made it sound like a condition, a label that set him apart. But Andre no longer minded. Yes, he was here on scholarship. Yes, he was different from most Westridge students. And yes, he had something to say that was uniquely his. Taking a deep breath, Andre positioned his hands over the keys. The auditorium fell silent, waiting. He closed his eyes, found the first notes in his mind, and began to play. The piece started softly, tentatively, like a question being asked. Simple notes that spoke of his childhood, of his grandmother's gentle hands guiding his on the old upright piano. The melody built, growing more complex as it progressed, adding layers and textures that reflected his journey, the loss of his grandmother, the move to a new neighborhood, his mother's unwavering belief in him. Then came the discord, the challenging passages that represented his arrival at Westridge, the isolation, the whispers, the feeling of being constantly judged and found wanting. But through the discord ran a thread of determination, notes that persisted and refused to be silenced. Andre lost himself in the music, no longer aware of the audience or the stage lights or the weight of expectations. His fingers moved across the keys with a sureness that came from somewhere beyond conscious thought. This was his voice, his truth, spoken in a language more honest than words. As he approached the final movement, Andre opened his eyes. He saw his mother in the audience, dressed in her best clothes, tears streaming down her face. He saw Mr. Benton watching with pride and Ling with a fierce kind of joy. He saw Catherine standing at the side of the stage, her expression a mix of surprise and respect, and he saw Mr. Reynolds and Tyler, their faces frozen in identical masks of disbelief. The ending of his piece had eluded him during composition, refusing to take final form. Now in this moment it came to him with perfect clarity. Not a triumphant declaration or a sorrowful conclusion, but something more complex. Notes that spoke of possibility, of doors opening, of a future still being written. The final notes hung in the air, resonating through the silent auditorium. For a long moment no one moved or spoke. Andre sat with his hands still on the keys, heart pounding, waiting. Then from somewhere in the back a single person began to clap. Another joined and another until the sound swelled to fill the space. Andre stood on shaky legs to take his bow, and the applause grew louder, accompanied now by cheers and whistles. He looked out at the sea of faces and saw something he hadn't expected, not just approval but recognition. They had heard him, really heard him, perhaps for the first time. As he left the stage, Mr. Benton was waiting in the wings, his eyes bright with emotion. "That," he said, his voice thick, "is why music matters." Catherine approached next, her choir robe draped over one arm. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. I've never heard anything like it." "Thank you," Andre said simply, "for giving me the chance." After the final performance, as audience members mingled with performers in the lobby, Andre found himself surrounded by people he'd never spoken to before. Parents asking about his training, students who had barely noticed him in the hallways, even a local music teacher who handed him a card and mentioned scholarships for summer programs. His mother found him in the crowd, wrapping him in a tight hug. "I always knew," she whispered fiercely. "From the first time you touched a piano, I knew you had something special inside you." As the crowd began to thin, Andre noticed Mr. Reynolds standing with the headmaster and several other board members. To his surprise, the man nodded at him, not exactly friendly, but acknowledging. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. "So, Ling said, appearing at his elbow with her violin case. Was it worth it? Standing your ground? Andre thought about the past months, the early mornings practicing alone, the lunches spent with Catherine working through difficult passages, the threats and doubts and fear, and then the moment when his music had filled the auditorium, when he had finally been heard. Yes, he said simply, it was worth it. As they walked out into the winter evening, the stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Andre knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would still be whispers in the hallways, still be people who believed he didn't belong, but something fundamental had changed. He had found his voice, and once found it could never be silenced again.